So talking about the swans, Julie, I've got 19 of them here that I think I can use to demonstrate what Jeff was talking about as far as the different types. Swans are waterfowl, and all of my swans are very happy tonight because they all got a bath. So they all took a dip, and they're pretty happy about it. The swans are actually a little bit, it's a little bit complicated. And I wrote a series of 7 articles for the Crystal Ball back in 1999 and 2000. That's going back a long time now about them. And they're pretty well correct. But what happens over time is we learn more and we continue to research. So some information does change, and not a lot on the swans, but there are some changes that I will mention here as I move along. There is the color chart. We have Jack Thompson that's led these charts, and there is Jack worked with a group of us to develop that chart, and it is available on the Miami Valley website. It was published in the Crystal Ball, and it is current as what we know right now as far as the different colors and type combinations. It does not, of course, review all the different decorations that are on the swans. So Cambridge launched the swans in 1928. These more and more Cambridge is it's moving from collectible to genuine antique by hitting that 100-year mark. And the early swans now are reaching that threshold of becoming antique. In 1928, they launched the swans, and we called those Type 1. It was the original versions of the swans. This would be the 3-inch, the smallest size. Again, I'm showing some that weren't packed away. When I spoke at convention maybe a dozen years ago, I had all crystal ones, so we could really talk about the types. Well, people are curious on the decorations too, and I wore a solid colored shirt, so maybe the decoration would stand out. So I don't know if you can see this, but there is a lot of feather detail on the side of the swan. This 3-inch size is the smallest, and could be a nut for a table decoration. Could also be used as an ashtray. So I'm going to go through these by size. This is the 3-inch Type 1. We aren't sure why, but in 1933, Cambridge ditched that mold, created a brand new mold for the 3-inch swan. And this is it. Now, it's got the same enamel, satin finish and enamel decoration on it as the previous one, the Type 1. There you go. A way to really tell it, the difference is holding it this way. You can see the notches on the one on the right. The Type 2 has those notches towards the back. And from the top, you can see it's more of an oval shape, or it's more of a round shape on the Type 1. There isn't quite as much feather detail on the Type 2 as the Type 1 as well. Then, in 1939, there was a mold order that went in to change all the swans to look like one that had been altered in 1937, and that was the 8.5-inch. We'll come back to that later. So it's the same mold as this one that I just showed. However, they removed all the feather detail, and they started spreading the wings. So if you look from the top, you can see the wings are spread out on this smoke one that's on the right side of your screen. But it's actually from the same mold. They just remove the feather detail, and then when finishing the swan, while the molten glass was just out of the mold, they had a tool to spread the wings. Now, again, this enamel decoration on the Type 1 and Type 2, that is from that period in the early 30s when they were doing virtually all of the enamel decorations that many of us prize today. The smoke, this is one of only 2 known to exist. They popped up, the pair of them, at a mall south of Cambridge. And the other one is in the Cambridge Museum, and one day its neck fell off. So it's reglued. So I'm really happy as a swan collector to have this one of two smoked swans that are known to exist. Now, I'm going to mention the reproductions as I go along here. So this mold, Cambridge stopped using it in 1933. They only used it for 5 years, the type 1 3-inch swan, but they didn't throw the mold away. And when they ordered the molds be changed to remove the feather detail, they removed the feather detail on this one as well. And it's the one that went to Boyd after the factory was closed. So this swan without the feather detail, just smooth on the sides with the more round shape on top, Boyd used it extensively to make swans. And I just didn't have one handy that I could show here. I do have a 4-inch one, 4.5-inch one I can show. The other 3-inch swan mold went to Mosser, after Imperial closed. And this is a little blue one that's caused a lot of confusion, because if you look at it, it looks like moonlight blue, doesn't it? And the details are very much like the type 3 Cambridge. But if you look at it, the wings are not spread. It is a Mosser swan. There is no 3-inch swan in moonlight made by Cambridge. So this is the one that often causes a lot of confusion, because the shape is very similar to the Cambridge 3-inch mold type 3, but it doesn't have the spread wings. So that's the 3-inch swans. We'll now move on to the 4-inch, 4.5-inch. This is one in ebony. You can see it's got the feather detail. Quite this one, the black shows up nice. You can see the feather detail on it. And it's got the type 1 swans have the signature on the bottom, as do the type 2s, unless it's been polished off, because it wouldn't sit level. Now, they did have an addition for the 4.5-inch swan type 1, and that was an insert to make it a candle stick. So often these get separated. Sometimes they just pop up on eBay as a candle well, and sometimes they have 3 feet on the bottom here, little nubbins for feet. So they come both ways, both with and without those feet. So that's the type 1 4-inch swan. We didn't think there was a type 2, and type 2, when we get to the 8.5-inch, we'll see that there's a distinct difference between the type 1 and the type 2 and the type 3. But this is a type 2 crystal swan. You can see it's just like the black one I showed you, except that the feather detail has been removed. It is signed, but the wings are not spread. So we had thought that there was only type 2 swans in the 3-inch, 8-inch, and punch bowl, but it turns out all of the crystal swans have a type 2 version, which means the feather detail they don't have the full feather detail. At least some of the feather detail has been removed, but the wings are not spread, which all of the other type 3 swans do have spread wings. And then when we get to the type 3, again, this would be 39 and later. Here's an example in milk. Of course, that was made in 1934. They're only made in crystal starting in 1939, but they did, of course, make them in milk. And there was a change. They created a plunger such that they could be made with the candle well insert right in the swan. Okay, so either with or without the candle well, and that would mean a different plunger. Now, I do have an example of a Boyd, scratch summit, a Boyd. So Boyd got the 3-inch and 4-inch swan molds. Now, this is, I believe, a Vaseline color, which Cambridge didn't make. It looks, just like the type 2 that I showed you in crystal, dimension-wise, but it does have the candle well, and it does not have the spread wings. And it has the Boyd signature on the bottom. So we know this is made by Boyd. So Boyd made this 4-inch swan both with and without that candle well. Are you confused now? There's just an awful lot of detail, isn't there? Okay, so that's the 3-inch and the 4-inch. It actually gets a little easier from here going forward. The 6.5-inch swan, This is one that's got the Rockwell decoration. You can mix the feather detail, stand out quite nicely on it. So a lot of the same information as the 4-inch, just one size larger. The type 2 would again only be in crystal with the feather detail removed and without the spread wings. And then this is one with the spread wings. And of course, this again has to be 1954. And it does have the Charlton decoration on it, which is very striking with gold, spotted gold, spattered gold on the back, and even a gold flower on the interior. And you can see how much the wings are spread on it. So the type 3, Jeff, they've got those spread wings on all of them, on all the various sizes. So that takes care of the 6.5 inch. We're going up in size. So we're going to go to the 8.5 inch now. This is another one. It's decorated. It's a crown Tuscan swan. You can see a lot of the feather detail here, like all of the type 1s. It is signed on the bottom. However, this one, because it's got enamel decoration, is also got the crown Tuscan enamel stamp on the bottom as well. So this fits again what we were talking about with the 4.5 and the 6.5 inch. The type 1 has the feather detail. When in 1937, however, they did something different with just the 8.5 inch swan. And we know this because it appeared in a circular letter from the faculty, from the factory to the sales representatives. And it says, we have altered the shape, the detail on the 8.5 inch swan. And it was offered only in crystal and moonlight. So this is a moonlight swan type 2. If we compare it to the type 1, you can see the shape of the head is identical. Everything's identical, except they've taken off the feather detail here on the sides. And I expect one of the reasons they may have done that, just conjecture, that it would have been easier to take something like this out of the molds. I don't have hard documentation on that, but it would make all kinds of sense that with time, keeping that feather detail in the molds may have become a complication. Now the type 2 swans, and this is the first of them other than that 3-inch that we talked about that was done in 1933. They are signed on the bottom. It's probably too faint for you to see there, but it is signed on the bottom, does not have spread to the wings. Okay, so this is a 8.5 inch type 2 moonlight swan, maybe made only in 1937. It was certainly a very short period of time because very few of them have popped up. And when they do pop up, they command a pretty high price. Okay, so then we got type 3 in the 8.5 inch. So this is the 8.5 inch in type 3. This is moonlight, and actually it's the only one that we know of that's popped up so far in moonlight. We can see the beautiful spread to the wings. It's essentially the same otherwise as the type 2. There's no signature on the bottom. They remove the C in a triangle from the bottom, but it is the same mold as that type 2. Okay, but you can see the spread to the wings. Well, sticking with this then, as far as the 8.5 inch, this is the Summit reproduction. And yeah, the shape of it's very similar to that of the 8.5, the type 2 and type 3. However, the wings are not spread. There is no signature on the bottom. And if you look at the color, it isn't quite as pretty as our sparkly, bright moonlight color that we just showed on the type 2 and type 3 8-inch swans. Now, the Vogelsongs, Russ and Joanne, that ran the Summit factory, they did produce some very high quality glass. I would say this is quite a pretty swan and certainly has value, but it's a reissue. It's not a Cambridge original. They also made swans in the 10-inch size, and some of those are spectacular. There was just one on eBay in their version of Rubina that's just gorgeous. I've seen that swan in person many times, and actually I've got one packed away somewhere. They're just gorgeous, but they're not Cambridge. They're a reissue from the Cambridge mold. I'm closing in here, Julie. It's probably getting tedious.
No.
So
Not at all. I'm writing everything down because I always, when I'm looking at swans, I'm always asking myself questions. So this is perfect.
So this is the 10-inch. Of all the different sizes, this is the one I like the best. I just love the shape of this 10-inch swan. Now this one has a satin or frosted, whichever word you prefer, a decoration, except for on the beak and the feet, which is kind of nice accents. It stands out. It's got a lot of the feather detail. I don't know if you can see the feather detail on there. They're very elegant. Now, there have been some of these that have been popped up with a signature on the bottom, France. So again, this is conjecture. Don't know it for sure at all, but it could well be that this mold originated in France, came to Cambridge, and then Cambridge decided to produce more in other sizes. And we don't know. Is it possible that France copied Cambridge? I suppose, but my experience is 9 times out of 10, Cambridge was the copier. They were making glass to sell, and they saw something that they liked, especially from another country. They didn't have any problem making something similar. Now, this one also, just a little side story, has a Cambridge sticker on it. Oh, how exciting, a Cambridge sticker. What's the problem? It's a foil sticker. They weren't using foil stickers in the late 20s and 1930s when this swan was made. So all of you, whenever you see a sticker, don't put any faith in that sticker whatsoever. I have a box of these stickers in the basement. I've got another box with these foil labels with Buy Imperial on the bottom. They're out there, and I know of collectors who take Cambridge labels off of ordinary pieces to place on premium pieces so they can maybe sell it for more because it's got a Cambridge sticker on it. So just buyer beware on the stickers. They really aren't valuable. A Cambridge signature, on the other hand, the C and the triangle on the bottom, which this has faint, you can't see it well because of the frosting on it, but that does mean something. Now, I don't have, or I'm not going to show the type 2 or the type 3 in this 10-inch size because it's the same what we've talked about in the other sizes. The type 2, it's only crystal, and it's had the feather detail removed, but it does not have the spread to the wings, made only in crystal. This type 1 was made in the colors that all of the type 1s were made in, crystal, which isn't really a color, ebony, light emerald, and peach blow. But for the 8-inch and the 10-inch, they added 4 more colors. So the 8-inch that we just talked about in these 10-inch, they added 4 more colors. Amber, which is not that terribly hard to find. Crown Tuscan, which is much harder to find. And then a very small number, maybe 6 or 8, and forest green are known to exist, and maybe about 4 are known to exist in gold crystal. They're more common, all of them, in the 8-inch size than in the 10-inch size. Okay. Then we're going to go up one more size, and that's the 13-inch. And this is a big, gorgeous piece of glass. You can see the feather detail, the sparkle. Often on eBay, they're listed as a punch bowl. No, they're not a punch bowl. It's a table centerpiece. They are gorgeous in all regards, I would say. And again, these were made just in those 4 standard colors. Again, crystal, if you consider that a color, which this is, ebony, peach blow, and light emerald. Now, of those 4, it's just amazing the difference in how often they come up. These are far more common in light emerald than any other color. Next most common is ebony. The peach blow is hard to find, and this crystal is extremely hard to find. It took me years, and it took most swan collectors years to get this 13-inch swan in crystal. Now, usually those in crystal don't bring as much, value, don't have as much value as the other colors. But if you're a true swan collector, you want all the different combinations, and the 13-inch in crystal is extremely hard to find. There was one on eBay just over the last couple months that did sell. And then the last one is the punch bowl. And talk about a chunk of glass. There's all kinds of stories from the factory, from the workers. And of course, all those stories you have to accept with a grain of salt. But they said it took a team of men to produce these, to get them out of the molds. The mold is in the Cambridge Museum, so you can see the original mold of this swan. Now, this one is the type 2. The swan punch bowl wasn't introduced until the late 30s, I believe 1937. There had been mold orders starting in 1930 for a large aquarium. And maybe some of you heard Lynn Welker's commented, well, it was originally made as an aquarium. Well, there was a mold order for an aquarium, but it would be awful hard to see the fish through the thickness of this glass. So I don't know that it was ever made in the late 30s really as an aquarium, but it was made as a punch bowl. Now, this is the type 2 because it has some feather detail. And if you look in the catalogs from 1937 and 1938, it's this swan. And compared to the ones made in 1939 and later, these have some feather detail, the center wells, quills, I should say, and there's all kinds of roughness or detail on the neck. And in 1939, when they changed all the swan molds, all the rest of the swan molds, they took all of that detail off. So this one was made for a very short period of time, maybe just 1937, 38. And Lynn Welker and I talked about it for years. We'd never seen one. Well, then, wouldn't you know, at Bring and Brag at convention, there was one. And Lynn and I were just giddy. A problem, though, it just had a huge crack right down the middle. So it was hugely damaged, but we were just like, wow, it does exist. There is that punch bowl is out there, the type 1 with more feather detail. Well, then, since then, whenever a swan punch bowl pops up online, eBay or otherwise, I just study that punch bowl to see if it's got the quills and the detail on the neck to see if it's type 1 instead of a type 2. Because they made, type 3. The type 3 punch bowl, which does not have the feather detail, was made from 1939 to 1958. They sold it right until the very end of the factory. So they're all over the place. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're all over the place, but there's a lot of them. But to find a type 2, so I have found 2 of these. I sold the other one to a collector. So the 3 of them are the only ones I've ever seen or heard of. Certainly they made a lot more than 3, and they could still be out there. Also, there's a base for these, and it's really the same base that they use for the monkey lamp. And of course, that base was ebony. They just took that same mold, and it's rather small, but it fits right on that oval. You can sit the swan on the base, but it's the same base that was used for the monkey lamp. It's identical. Now, the type 3 punch bowl was also made in milk glass in 1954. And again, that's a short period of time, and it's a proper color of a North American swan. So that's a pretty prized piece. And then, we had the wonderful experience here not that long ago that Sue Cameron showed a swan from her family's collection that had a satin finish done, a pinkish satin finish, we believe, by Dorothy Thorpe. So thank you so much, Sue. It's a nice partner to my other one, type 2. So I'm not going to show it here because they're heavy to show, but with the feather, without the feather detail. So they are in milk, in crystal, and then some with crystal satin or that Dorothy Thorpe treatment. So I think that's probably enough, Julie, to get things rolling here. I don't know how long I babbled on, but you can tell there's way too long. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We've had questions in the chat box.
Okay, let's see.
The question in the chat box is, some of the swan necks have more curve than others. Also, in some swans, the head looks like it is turned to the side and some are straight on. Is this just my perspective or are they different? That comes from Kathleen Claveter.
Yeah, it's very true. There's difference in how much twist there is to the neck. You can really see it in the mold to the punch bowl that's in the Cambridge Museum. They've got it on display there. And the neck really just comes straight out. I mean, it goes up like a swan and straight out. But sometimes they twisted those necks to the side when they were finishing them. And it does seem as the years went by, they twisted them more. So like this swan punch bowl I just showed you are pretty much straightforward, a little bit of twist, but the milk glass ones are almost in 1954 are twisted around tremendously. I've got an ebony 3-inch that's got the neck twisted around so much, it goes almost right up to the side of the body. And like this milk one, you can see that how much it's 1958. So as the years went by, they tended to do more twisting of the neck after it came out of the mold. But it really doesn't mean anything as far as them being Cambridge or not Cambridge. Because, for example, this Summit one, it's got some twist to the neck as well. So again, when they took the glass out of the molds, it was still warm and pliable. So it was relatively easy to twist the neck. And I suppose if they weren't careful, it would maybe sag a little bit on its own as well. So that's a very good question that's come up often over the years that, well, if the neck is twisted, then it's a type 3, or if the neck is twisted, it's not Cambridge, or vice versa. So I don't think we can put any credence to that.
So it wasn't a quality control issue either.
Quality control.
Right.
Was there such a thing?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's just the humans.
Yeah, it's handmade glass. Yeah. That's a wonderful question. I'm glad you asked it. I should have included it because so many people, bring that up as a point that the twist of the neck maybe means something, and it really does not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we did not have a lot of respondents saying they were showing swans tonight, but we did have Mary and Jeff Check saying they would have some swans to share. So if I didn't get your email, I might have missed it. I've had a lot of Cambridge email this week. Just send a message in the chat box for me and I'll make sure that we put you on the list. So we'll start off with Mary and Jeff, and then I'm not sure who's on deck. But we'll figure it out real quick.
We've always tried to study the different types of swans, and other than the type 1, I can never keep them straight. I just can't remember. This one is the largest that we've got, and that's because I love the feather detail on them. I just think this is so pretty. And this was, I think, 8.5. Was it 8.5?
No, that's a 10-incher.
Is it okay?
10-incher? Wow.
That's
I know we have
you measure them from the front of the breast to
Right.
the tail. So that's a 10-inch, yeah. And it's beautiful swan.
And then this is the next.
That's an 8.5-inch.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I love the feather detail on them. This one, we weren't sure if this was Cambridge or if this was a reproduction.
That's Cambridge. That's a 6.5-inch Carmen.
Okay.
Wow.
And then we have it in the, I think this one is signed. The little one, and this one does have one of the older labels on it.
That's a type 3, though. It's not signed. Yeah.
Right.
And then we have and this is signed. This is the
Type 2 in royal blue. Yeah. Gorgeous. Isn't it?
Yeah, I love the
Yeah,
color.
they
I
didn't
love
make other sizes in royal blue. They only made the 3-inch in royal blue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the crystal swan, the candle holders.
Yep.
And we have them in the milk glass as well. Same as you showed, and we have a milk glass. And then this one we use with the candle holders. I think I might have bought them actually as a together. I can't remember, but they look nice together.
And they would have been made at the same time. Type
Mhm.
3-inch crystal.
And that's all that we got out.
I just saw you said all that we got out. That always means there's probably another flock somewhere else in the house, which is good. Okay, so with that, I had a chat come in and oh, we have another one here. Okay, so I have David and then I'm going to put Joanne on deck.
All right, Julie, thank you for giving me a chance to share. I may have mentioned this before. I wasn't a swan collector until I visited Les Hansen back in 1999. And when I walked into his living room, all those swans were waiting to greet me as I walked in. And seeing them all together was just incredible. And I really kind of fell in love with the forest green and the gold crystal ones. And as Les mentioned, those are not very easy to find. So probably 20 years later, I think I may have finally completed the gold crystal and forest green swans. So visiting different collections can cause your collection to diversify as well. So be warned. One of the most exciting finds I had as a younger swan collector was at the Scott Antique Market here in Columbus. And I was able to find the Type 2 3-inch swan in forest green. And of all the 3-inch swans, undecorated ones, the forest green one is quite difficult to find. You'll find the emerald green ones in the Type 3, but the forest green ones will be signed. This was so exciting. As I walked in the booth, I could see this little trinket sitting on a shelf in the back, and I had been looking for years to find this. And living here in Ohio and knowing lots of collectors, I still wasn't able to add one of these to my collection. So that was probably one of the most exciting pieces I found out in the wild. Another item that I cherish in my swan collection, this is the 10.5-inch Type 1 in pink, but this one comes with the flower pot insert. And I don't know how many flower pots exist. They're kind of tricky to get into the swan, and they're kind of loose fitting, but they do have a hole in the bottom for good drainage. So some of those swans that you see that are badly stained on the inside, maybe they had a flower pot in them at one time, and then the flower pot got so stained and awful, they probably just pitched that out. But I know of one crystal one, at least one crystal flower pot, and I know of at least one ebony one. I have never heard of a light emerald flower pot, but they certainly should be out there. But that would just be such an attractive set. Any color, it's an attractive set.
David, of course, I've been on the hunt all these years. I have 2 in peach blow and 1 in ebony, and that's all that's ever come my way after all those years. So I agree with you. I've never seen one in light emerald.
They just fit so loosely. I imagine they got damaged, and just like the candle holders, they likely got separated at one point. The last one I'm going to share is this is a Carmen Type 2, and this one actually came from Charlie Upton's collection. As you can see, as I turn it over to the bottom, it's hard to believe that that is a Carmen swan because it's just almost pure yellow on the bottom. But it was such a cool example. If Cambridge did something called Amberina, this would have been a great example. But I was fortunate enough to get that out of Charlie's collection just because it's so unique in the color variation in it. And I know when Les did the program on Carmen, Carmen had to be reheated to bring out the color. And there are some Carmen swans that are beautiful red from the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail. A lot of them do have yellowish necks on them, with the rest of the body being good in Carmen. But this was the only one I've ever seen with such a variation in the coloring. Probably we would say this one was a little bit underfired in the kiln, and so the Carmen didn't really come out all that well.
Yeah, David, when I visited with Russ Vogelsong at his Summit factory, we didn't really know what the color would have been when it first came out with that formula, the selenium and cadmium sulfide. And it turns out he said it was yellow. So if they're underfired, they'll be yellowish like yours, that one. And of course, some of them, they can, if they get overfired, they can turn just like almost a dark beet red that it's unappealing. So it was pretty tricky, and probably why Carmen sold for 50% higher in price most of the years that came to get that just right, that reheating process. They probably had to discard quite a few of them because they weren't saleable.
And I just, for our audience this evening, if Les mentioned the type 2 8.5-inch swan, if you are ever lucky enough to find a swan that would be the 8.5-inch type 2 size that has a lid on it, and that lid would make it more of a covered candy, and that lid in the type 2 would have a beautiful rose finial on it, that is certainly a premium piece, and very few of those have been found. I don't know if they were ever shown in a catalog with the lid or not, but several of them, I shouldn't say several, yeah, right. A few in Moonlight and a few in Crystal have shown up. So they certainly were made. So keep an eye out for that. If you see a swan with a lid with a rose knob on it, that is a prized piece. And I'm sure you could find someone, if you don't want it, you could find someone who does.
Are you pitching to get it? Is that what
Yes,
you're doing,
I
David?
want to take out an ad at the end of the program.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, David. Those are really, really unique items to see. So we so appreciate you sharing with us. And with that, I'm going to go next to Joanne, and then we'll have Gwinnell on deck.
Okay, so I don't know, am I showing up
Higher.
higher? Oh, okay, so this is our forest green swan. Wait a minute, whoops, that way.
Actually, that's not forest green.
Oh,
That's
is it not light
that's a
emerald?
type 3 late dark emerald. And
Oh,
isn't
wow.
that a beautiful swan? Because that's the swan that I was gifted that started my collection. That very
Oh.
swan. But it's actually late dark emerald, not forest green.
Oh, okay. So, well, we have a bunch of swans. I'll tell you the story. We have a bunch of swans, but I didn't get any of them out, and this one just happens to be out. And so there you go. We have a lot of them. So I don't know. It's a little crazy, but I have a friend who's a swan collector, and she collects every swan of every kind. And I'll have to ask her about the cover, because she collects Duncan and Miller and all those swans. So
Well, I'm sure if she has one, you have several interested parties here that would take it off her hands. So I'm glad that you have, it's too bad you don't have all your swans out, but I understand if you're like me, you have them tucked away sometimes and they're a little hard to get to. So thank you for sharing that one. I really appreciate it. And as does the rest of the audience here. So with that, we're going to move on to Gwinnell.
Good evening. I've got a little 3.5-inch. I think it's the type 1 because there is the feathering detail on the neck and the feathers. I think in what, peach blow. And then a type 3 in the 4.5-inch because there's no detail on the neck or the feathers. The peach blow is signed. And there's what is that? 10-inch maybe?
8.5.
8.5. It's got type 1 with the details on the neck and the feathers. And it is signed. And the biggest one we've got is this one. Just what? Probably the 10-inch.
Yeah, thank you, Gwenelle, because that is the 10-inch type 3, which I didn't show. So I had mine packed away. So it's
I
got
wasn't
spread
sure that
wings.
it was Cambridge.
Oh, it is. Can you
Okay,
show the spread wings from the top view. There you go. See how spread the wings are? Yeah.
Yeah.
Summit made that size, but they did not spread the wings. Also, Summit made no get glass and crystal. All
oh,
Summit
okay.
glass is colored. And people don't realize that crystal glass is really a hard color to make. And there's a lot of crystal that might have a yellow tinge if you get the pieces side by side, or a green tinge or a little blue tinge. So crystal was a very hard color to actually get consistent from batch to batch. And the Vogelsons didn't want to mess with that. So they only made colored glass.
Well, that's what we've got.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Gwenelle. It's always nice to see what you have to share with us. And I don't see one of your little ladies around tonight, so they must
No,
be
they were
sleeping
here,
elsewhere.
now they're gone.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing with that. It's so appreciative
Very
every time.
welcome.
Also, I have a couple of questions before I did get one set of photos, and that's it tonight. Les, I know that we talked about charlatan decoration. And when you go into the museum, when it's up on one of the cabinets, there's a large crystal decorated charlatan. How many of the swans were decorated in charlatan? Like crystal, what were some of, I know milk glass, you showed us one. Were there any others decorated? Was crown decorated in charlatan?
Yeah, well, certainly. For Crown Tuscan, the 3-inch and 8-inch were decorated with the roses. Not the 3-inch with the roses, excuse me, the 8-inch with the roses, and also both sizes with gardenia and the blue mist. And then what you're talking about, the 13-inch crystal type 3, was decorated with the Charlton roses, and they also did the 8-inch, just those two sizes in crystal. And then in milk glass, it's the 3-inch, the 6-inch, and the 8-inch. So why they pick certain sizes, why the Charlton decoration, was put on when that company purchased them, why they only pick certain sizes of those three, I don't know. I have no idea. We do know for sure the milk glass that it's, the year was 1954. I think the research with the Charlton group, the blue mist was 1953. And that's why there's not much of it. Gardenia was somewhat before that. And of course, most Cambridge with Charlton decoration is the roses, the Charlton roses, or a variation of it.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to share my screen. Okay. There we go. Let me blow this one up. All right, so this came from Pam Waislick Orm, who is not able to attend tonight, but she did want to share a couple of photos. So let me see if I can't move everybody back over here or up. There we go. So obviously this is a beautiful milk glass swan. I am unsure of the size. It's very hard to gauge. Any guesses, Les?
It's kind of funny because they advertised them as 16 inch, but actually the length from the front to the back, not the head, from the front to the best of the back, it's also 13 inches. So, but they listed them as 16 inches. And of course, they're quite a bit taller and wider than the standard 13-inch swan. But yeah, the milk glass is pretty spectacular. What's kind of different about this one than most of the milk swans have a tremendous twist to the neck, and this one does not. It's closer to the way it originally came out of the mold. But they're pretty spectacular.
So you said this is taller and wider
Than a 13-inch swan.
than a 13-inch swan.
But
Why
it's
would
the same length as a 13-inch swan, front to back. It's rounder looking down than a 13-inch swan, which is more oval shaped.
just out of curiosity, why would that be?
I have no idea.
I'm like, okay. So then she also was able to send obviously the Swan Cups, which we've not seen any tonight, but certainly with the punch bowl, you would have the Swan Cups. So here's a really nice representation of those. And she was kind enough to show two different views, the feather detail, and then also you can see the handle on the cup. I can't really tell from her photo if it has much detail, but obviously you can see the breast with the feathers. So were there any difference in the punch cups then, Les, over the course of time?
No. So there really isn't any detail to speak of because the feathers are pretty small on that punch cup. So when they were, issued in 1937, originally they look like this in crystal. They only appear in crystal and milk. I do have one that's got satin finish on just the swan part, and the rest is clear crystal. And that might be that they were made to go with the crystal ones that Cambridge frosted.
Okay. Are there any frosted punch bowls, or these were just to go
Yes.
with maybe? Okay.
Yes, no, there's some that are frosted. I have one. There's one in the Cambridge Museum that's frosted. So Cambridge did apply that frost to some of the Swan punch bowls.
I think I missed that. So obviously when I go there next week, I will be looking for the frosted punch bowl. So, okay. That's all the pictures I've received, which is always unusual. Let me see. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to stop sharing then so we can get back. There we go. Are there any other questions that people have for Les? Because obviously we've got someone that really understands swans quite well here. And I know that I learn something new every day when I'm on Zoom. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, I've got a few more messages here. Let me see what else.
Julie, if I could, I might as well show one.
Okay, great, Jack. Thank you.
We never owned a swan in our collection forever, but we have been forever big candlestick collectors. So we said, well, this is a great opportunity to, let me see if I can get this. It's the swan this is the only one we have. We have a pair of these actually. And this is the 4.5 inch, I think, right? But that has the light emerald that has the candle well that goes in it. So
and Jack, does that candle well have the little feet on the bottom?
no, it does not. It's got a plain
Flat bottom.
bottom on it. So have you seen those in light emerald? I've seen them in ebony with the little feet on it, but do they make them?
I think it was all of them. Yeah.
Okay, all of them. Okay. So anyway, so this was a way for us to get a swan in our collection and have the candlestick too. So that's the only one we got. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. As you got to somehow find some way to get a swan into your collection. I find that is absolutely true. So we did have a couple of questions that I'm going to come back to. So Shelley Nussbaum says that they have a couple of Crown Tuscan swans with gardenias. Excellent. Shelby, next time you have to show us. Then we went on, it says, what swans did Imperial make? Is there a way to distinguish between the two companies?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So yes, Imperial had the molds, got the molds. They only made them in crystal, but they did have the tool to spread the wings. So the Type 3 by Imperial in crystal, I don't know that you can say with any certainty whether they're Imperial or they're Cambridge. Also, as far as Imperial, their satin finish, they had two different names. Sometimes they called it doe skin, sometimes they called it lalique, and it tended to be fainter than Cambridge's satin finish. So if you have a Cambridge Type 3 swan with a really faint satin finish, it may be that it was actually made by Imperial. The other thing that us swan collectors like is the ones with the ruby flash. The ruby stain is the correct way, but we often say ruby stain flash. And actually, we believe they're probably all done by Imperial, because that was a pretty common decoration that Imperial did on their glassware. So if and I have them in the 6-inch, the 8-inch, and the 10-inch sizes, and I think they're beautiful, but they could actually very well be made by Imperial. And some of the glass that was made by Imperial, when we were talking about the nudes, we talked about the Moonlight top nude comport. I love them. There's 4 different variations. I don't care if Imperial made them. As many people say, it's high quality glass. It was some of the same workers after Cambridge closed, went to work for Imperial. They got the tools, the same finishing tools that were used by Cambridge. So, what's the big deal? It's beautiful glass. It's fairly old. But there are a few things like that. There's really no definitive way to know for sure. Could Cambridge have done some ruby staining on some swans? Yes, but we don't have any record of it, but we know that Imperial did.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We also have a question that says, actually a statement question. So to clarify, when you measure a swan, it is only from the breast back and does not include the neck at all.
Yeah, well, the problem with the measurement, so it's the front of the swan. The neck does attach to the front.
Yeah.
If you look at these swans, they're not all exactly the same in shape, because when they come out of that mold again, they're soft and they sag and they shift. And of course, if they use the flaring tool on the type 3s, that's going to affect the shape and probably make them a little shorter from front to back. So generally we say, the standard statement is that it's from the breast to the back that we do the measurement, but it's not going to be exact.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, so are there any other questions that anybody has for Les or anybody else?
I have a question, Julie.
Sure.
Les, what can you tell us about a metal swan that looks like it came from the Cambridge mold, silver colored metal with a light green glass insert that goes in like a liner for the body of the swan?
Yeah, they're pot metal. They are identical to shape to the 8-inch swans. As far as the feather detail, everything is identical. We don't really know, Sue, and we don't know which one came first. But the insert, whoever made them, some of the inserts, they're inserts from the 20s, so they're old. It's a mayonnaise liner. And some of them are Cambridge and some of them are not Cambridge. So whichever company that was, may have bought those inserts from different companies to put in those pot metal swans, but they are not made by Cambridge. And so, we just, again, so much we don't know. Did the pot metal swan come before the glass one by Cambridge? Or did the Cambridge swan set the standard for that company that made them in pot metal? I don't know of anybody that knows for sure.
But you're saying then that the green glass insert would not have been made, definitely wouldn't have been made by Cambridge.
It could have been made by Cambridge, Sue. It could have been. And there's some that have popped up that are signed. So they are with the Cambridge C in a triangle. But there's also inserts that were not made by Cambridge. So another case that was another company that was making those, but I haven't heard of anybody that's tracked down what company that was.
Okay.
Maybe someone has, but I'm not aware.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And there's matching candlesticks to go with them,
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they're gorgeous. Yes. They're all pot metal with no glass component at all.
Okay, that would give something to look for. Thank you.
Oh, no, you just started it all over. We've seen all these little pot metal pieces with all the little Cambridge glass, and we saw some last Yeah, and the smoking items, we saw those were pot metal as well, correct, Les? With some had the right Cambridge
Yes, yeah.
inserts and some did not. So are all these pot metals, do we think they're made by a similar company?
Well, it's possible, but I wouldn't assume that by any means. There were a lot of enterprising companies that made items with pot metal. So I don't know. I've never seen a book or a catalog or anything from a company, but it might be out there. Maybe somebody knows something that many of us do not. I don't know.
Very interesting. So I find it fascinating, again, coming back to Cambridge, very enterprising. You think the silver that was used and how many companies had silver and they had inserts that went into them. And now we're seeing pot metal, which I didn't really know a lot about prior to Zoom. So I find this really interesting that now I have more to look for. I'm like, Sue, I'm going to have to start looking now. This is terrible. I'll just have to buy another china cabinet. But it happens. So are there any other questions for Les? I mean, I have found this quite fascinating. I've taken like 5-6 pages of notes tonight.
Julie, maybe I could add, I'm surprised on two fronts. Number one, I'm surprised how many people we have tonight because I didn't think this topic would have as much broad appeal as some others. And secondly, I'm surprised that more people aren't showing swans that they consider to be reissues because there are so many Summit and Boyd and Mosser swans out there. But it must be that they all know that they're not Cambridge. So.
We're all distinguished collectors, Les. We've been reading your articles. We've been really listening. And so obviously we've become quite good collectors and not getting those fake swans. But anyway, no, I'm just kidding. I know that I've seen several. I have a Summit one upstairs. I use it as a jewelry catch-all. So I had to have it because it was moonlight, kind of like the moonlight blue. But I think we're all now going to be looking for forest green. We're going to be looking for, obviously, these larger sizes. And again, you said there is a color chart, correct, that we can go and reference?
Yes, it was published in the Crystal Ball, and Jack also has it on the Miami Valley website. If you go to their homepage, you can look at there's a little square with the charts, and it's most up to date. Okay,
great. All right, well, that's all I have in questions. I'm always curious. So with that, is there any other questions before we say good night?
Hey, Julie, I do.
Okay.
Okay. Les, this one's for you too, probably. A Crown Tuscan. Notice how the different size 1 foot is from the other one? No, I read somewhere, heard somewhere that a reproduction one is that way. Or is this just a fluke?
Yeah, the thing with the type 3s, the one you're holding there, that's got beautiful fire, doesn't it? It's got beautiful opalescence.
Yeah.
Clyde Ingersoll was one of the original members of the club and was the lead swan collector, wrote the original article about the different types of swans. And he had some little thing about that thing that sticks out on the side of the foot. And he actually talked about a type 3A and a type 3B. Well, I think there's actually a type 3A, B, and C. But no, I wouldn't use that as a distinguishing factor, Jeff. I just don't think that's valuable.
Okay.
A lot of those Crown Tuscan ones have that little extra appendage that sticks out there. That's
Okay.
a type 3 Cambridge swan.
Okay.
It's very spread wings on it.
And this one, I am not 100% that it is Cambridge.
It's solid in color. It's not ruby stained, is it?
Right. No, it's not.
No, it's Cambridge.
Okay.
It's got the spread
It
to the
just-
wings. And they really twisted the neck on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's, it really is.
No, it's a beautiful Carmen swan.
Yeah, I
love
really
the way
like
I
it.
love the twist to that neck.
Yeah. And the best thing about it, it was dirt cheap. But that and I have these pinker ones.
Type
This
one.
one is way darker
Yeah.
than this one.
Yeah.
Is that just the way they were?
Well, no, there's three colors of glass that are really hard to control from batch to batch. And I just mentioned one of them is crystal, if you consider that a color. The other two that are very hard to control from batch to batch are pink and amber. Pink is very hard to control from batch to batch. So peach blow, it's also in later years was called dianthus pink. Some are like a true pink. Some are a warm orangish pink, and some are a very dark red burnt pink. They're all peach blow, dianthus pink, and it was just pink was a very hard color for glass companies to make consistently from batch to batch.
Yeah. Okay. And this one you think is late dark emerald then? Not the forest green?
That's a 3-inch, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, David, Jeff had one all along. No, that's a type 2 forest green.
Well,
Jeff,
they're
that was
everywhere.
Too easy.
Hey,
No,
Jack,
they're not everywhere.
they're everywhere. Well, this one, I don't even know where I got it. And it's signed.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Well, I try to get all the colors I can. And of course I got this Mandarin gold.
Gold
or
crystal.
Gold crystal.
Mhm. Type 2.
Okay. Also signed. Most of mine are signed. So, but anyway, thanks for the info. This was a great session in my book.
I didn't confuse you.
Oh yeah, but that's okay. I'm easily confused. But I know more now than I did an hour ago.
Good.
So that's good. That's good. This stuff is awesome. So, well, I thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I think that you just made everyone jealous because for some reason you just went to your shelf and plucked off a forest green one just like that, Jeff.
Oh yeah, that's the only one I got.
Oh, well, if you come across more, I'm sure you've got a whole group of friends here that would be love to know where you got it from or maybe take it off your hands.
I don't remember where that one come from. Usually I could tell you where I got everything. I don't remember. I did find a punch bowl in an antique store close to Chicago, but it was an ungodly amount of money with only 4 cups. So it stayed there.
Mhm.
But ungodly amount of money could be $600. I don't know what they sell for or what people buy a complete one for, but in my opinion, that was way out of range. I
Historically,
know where it's.
yeah, historically before eBay, they were a pretty consistent $1,200 sale, but
Yeah.
there have been quite a few on eBay now. So I think probably if they're in perfect condition, a full set with the base and the cups, you're probably talking more like 600.
Yeah, it had the base, but it only had 4 cups with it.
Yeah, you can get the cups pretty easy though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there was a milk punch bowl with cups last year at convention. I believe there was one set last year, or it might have been the year before.
And they did not make the base in milk. So the milk is just the milk swan in the cups. There's no base in milk to set it on. If you want to have base, you're going to have to put it on a crystal one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, interesting. See, we find out good things every single month at Zoom. That's why I
Yep.
love Zoom.
That's what's so nice about this. All that information is out there with others. So I appreciate it.
Well, great. We're glad because I think, like I said, this is one of my favorite days of the month is to see everyone and to learn something new, obviously. And I was always of a family that said, as long as you live, you should always try to learn something new every single day. So this is one of the highlights of my month. And thank you so much, Les, for providing us with such great knowledge. And also Jack for making the card and the color card. And obviously, this is never as good as it is without all of you providing samples and from your collection and showing us what you have. And then we all go back and say, well, now maybe I need that. So thank you to all of you for sharing. And David, do you want to close things up here?
Sure, I can say a few words. Again, thank you to Les and all the information he shared with us tonight. Swans, the details can get a little bit challenging at times, but you just learn a little bit more each time. And as you ask questions, you just get better and better at identifying types and colors. And you just become a more knowledgeable collector. So don't ever feel fear that you can't ask a question, because that's what these are all about. I think, Julie, I don't know if you were going to say something about convention, but I want to talk briefly and invite everyone. If you haven't set your registration in for your convention, I'm sure Julie and Christine would love to receive your registration in the mail. And it's going to be a great convention. There's going to be a great glass show with about 17, 18 dealers. And there's always so much great glass at the show and at the Glass Dash on Saturday. So it's always such a fun time to get together with fellow collectors and talk about things that we don't always get to talk about, other than maybe once a month on Zoom.
May I ask one question?
You sure can.
When is the August meeting? I don't have the date.
The Zoom and Tell program,
Zoom and Tell.
it is, let me back up, July, you said August 15th.
Thank you.
What's so wonderful about Cambridge is really the fellowship and the warmth that you feel from everyone that's a collector, and the willingness to share knowledge like we see this evening from Les, from David, from Jack, from others that are part of the club. But certainly, you know, I look at it as every opportunity that we gather as a way to really see my friends again. So I'm just going to close with that. And I look forward to seeing everybody next month. Those of you that will be at convention, I look forward to seeing you next week. Those that can't attend, I look forward to seeing you next month on Zoom. So with that, I'm going to sign off and say good night, and everyone have a very good evening, and we'll see you next month.